Europe does not look like it is collapsing, and that is exactly why this moment is dangerous, because history shows that systems rarely die when everyone expects them to. They weaken when life still feels normal, when salaries are still paid, when supermarkets are full, when banks are open and screens still glow green. But beneath that surface, a structure can already be losing the strength that once made it powerful, and Europe today is not standing on crisis, it is standing on exhaustion. The headlines tell you inflation is cooling, the numbers look calmer, the panic phase has passed, but inflation slowing does not mean damage reversing. Prices did not go back, wages did not suddenly catch up, savings that were drained did not magically refill. What changed is only the speed of pressure, not the pressure itself, and this creates a silent shift. The middle class does not collapse dramatically, it slides downward slowly, adjusting expectations, shrinking plans, accepting less without calling it loss, and when decline feels gradual, people call it adaptation. Europe's real problem is not inflation, it is the disappearance of momentum. Economies that grow at 1% are not expanding, they are preserving shape while losing force. This is the economic equivalent of a body that is not dying but no longer building strength. Demographics are aging, energy is expensive, industry is under pressure, regulation is heavy, global competition is faster and more aggressive than ever, and Europe, once the center of industrial power, now fights to maintain ground rather than to conquer new space. Growth is not just a number, growth is what allows systems to carry promises, pensions, healthcare, social protection, infrastructure, political stability. All of this was designed for an environment where expansion paid for commitments, but when expansion slows, promises do not shrink, they stay, and the weight shifts from growth to borrowing, and borrowing is not neutral, borrowing is time being pulled forward and spent today. Public debt across Europe is already massive, and unlike a company, a state cannot simply shut down departments without social explosion. Pensions cannot be paused, hospitals cannot be closed, social systems cannot be turned off without destabilizing the political foundation that holds everything together. So governments do what systems always do: when growth is weak and obligations are strong, they borrow, and when borrowing becomes structural rather than temporary, the system enters a new phase. It survives on future capacity. This is where the illusion of stability forms, because day-to-day life continues, nothing dramatic happens, there is no headline that says decline has started. Instead, there is a gradual normalization of fragility. Interest payments grow, budget flexibility shrinks, policy choices narrow, and governments begin managing balance rather than building expansion. At the same time, another shift happens that is less visible but more structural. Europe's industrial position is under long-term pressure. Production that once defined the continent now competes with regions that offer lower energy costs, fewer regulatory barriers, faster capital deployment, and more aggressive industrial policy. Companies do not leave loudly, they move quietly. Capacity shifts, investments are delayed, expansions happen elsewhere. And over time, this erodes not just jobs but the ecosystem of innovation, supply chains, and productivity growth. Productivity is the engine behind living standards, and Europe's productivity growth has been weak for years. This is not about one policy mistake, it is about structural friction, aging workforces, slower innovation diffusion, fragmented markets, complex regulatory systems, and high energy dependency. And when productivity slows, wages cannot rise strongly without inflationary pressure, so real income growth becomes limited. And when income growth stalls, consumption slows, and when consumption slows, the service economy weakens and the loop tightens. Confidence is the invisible layer holding this structure together. Consumers need confidence to spend, companies need confidence to invest, banks need confidence to lend, investors need confidence to fund government debt, and confidence is not built on speeches, it is built on expectation of future expansion. When the future feels smaller than the past, behavior changes quietly. Households save more, businesses hold back, capital, banks tighten standards. This is not panic, this is caution, and caution across an entire economy creates stagnation. Monetary policy used to be the emergency lever. Central banks could cut rates, stimulate credit, push investment forward. But now the room to maneuver is narrow. Lower rates risk reigniting inflation, higher rates pressure already weak growth, so policy becomes balancing, not stimulating. Central banks manage damage rather than create acceleration. And when monetary policy loses power, fiscal policy becomes the focus, but fiscal policy is constrained by debt levels and political limits. Europe is caught between inflation risk and stagnation risk, between social promises and fiscal limits, between global competition and internal fragmentation. This is not collapse, it is structural tension, and tension that lasts long enough changes behavior permanently. Expectations adjust downward, ambition narrows, risk appetite shrinks. History shows that long stagnation is more corrosive than short crisis. Crisis forces change, stagnation preserves structure while draining energy year after year. Without dramatic failure, systems lose dynamism. Young people see fewer opportunities, talent leaves, innovation slows, political frustration grows, polarization rises, and governments respond not with bold reform but with management, and management preserves form while weakening substance. Europe still has wealth, still has institutions, still has stability, but the question is not what exists today, the question is whether the system still generates enough new strength to carry its own weight. And right now growth is weak, debt is high, demographics are unfavorable, productivity is slow, and global competition is intense. This combination does not produce collapse tomorrow, it produces gradual narrowing of options. When options narrow, policy becomes reactive, leaders manage shocks rather than shape the future, budgets become about balancing rather than building, politics becomes defensive, societies feel stuck, and when societies feel stuck, trust erodes slowly, not in dramatic revolt, but in quiet disengagement, lower participation, less optimism, weaker social cohesion. This is where economic decline connects to social stability, because prosperity is not only material, it is psychological, belief in upward movement, belief that effort leads to improvement, belief that the future can be better than the past. When that belief fades, systems do not break instantly, they harden, and rigid systems under pressure eventually crack. Europe's situation is not unique in history. Great systems often enter phases where structure remains but vitality fades. They live on accumulated capital, accumulated institutions, accumulated reputation, but current production of strength slows, and when new energy does not match existing obligations, strain builds invisibly. The risk is not one event, the risk is accumulated fragility. When a system runs close to its limits, even small shocks can have large effects: energy price spikes, geopolitical tension, financial stress, political instability. Any of these in isolation might be manageable, but under structural strain they interact. What we see now is not storm but pressure, drop before storm, not collapse but compression, and compression changes behavior. People become cautious, institutions become conservative, innovation becomes incremental rather than transformative. Europe can adapt, systems are not powerless, but adaptation requires difficult choices: productivity reform, industrial strategy, energy transition, fiscal restructuring, demographic response, and political alignment. These are slow, complex processes, and while they unfold, the system must survive a period of lower dynamism. This is the real environment modern economies operate in, not explosive crisis but prolonged constraint, not dramatic collapse but managed decline. Risk and managed decline is psychologically dangerous because it feels normal. People adjust downward until stagnation becomes baseline. The question is not whether Europe ends tomorrow, the question is whether the system can regenerate momentum before structural pressures solidify into permanent lower growth paths, and that depends on productivity, innovation, energy transition, fiscal balance, and social cohesion. Economic systems are not destroyed only by enemies or disasters, they weaken when incentives shift from building to preserving, when protection becomes stronger than expansion, when risk-taking declines, when confidence shrinks, when debt replaces growth, and when time becomes the main resource being spent. Europe today stands in that transition zone between expansion era and preservation era, and preservation eras are stable on the surface but fragile underneath because they rely on past strength while producing less new strength. The lesson from history is not panic, it is awareness. Systems rarely announce their turning points, they drift into them, and only later do people recognize when momentum was lost and when the future became smaller than the past. And that is the real risk zone, not visible crisis but invisible limitation, not collapse but constraint, not failure but fading dynamism. And fading dynamism in a high-debt, aging society is the most difficult environment to escape because energy must come from innovation and coordination, not from expansion alone. Europe is not falling, it is tightening, and tightening systems can hold for years, but each year of low growth and high obligation increases sensitivity to shock and reduces room for error. This is not a story of doom, it is a story of structural pressure, and structural pressure defines the era we are entering, not explosive collapse but constrained future, not chaos but compression, and in compression the strongest asset is adaptability, the strongest risk is denial. Because systems do not fail when people are afraid they fail, when people believe stability will continue automatically while foundations quietly weaken, and history shows that the most misleading moments are those where everything appears manageable. Europe is in such a moment, not crisis, not prosperity, but controlled strain, and controlled strain can last long, but it changes the trajectory of societies quietly, step by step, until one day the past feels like a different era and the shift is only visible in hindsight.